and welcome to CheersToFearYT, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Misery, directed by Reiner, who directed The Bucket List and Stand By Me. The movie is written by William Goldman, who took part in Dreamcatcher. And the other author, of course, is Stephen King, who is by no surprise considered the best horror writer of all time, writing books such as The Shining, and even the films that Reiner and Goldman worked on, being Stand By Me and Dreamcatcher, respectively.
In Misery, a famous writer, Paul Sheldon, crashes his car in the Colorado mountains, and he is discovered and saved by a nurse named Annie Wilkes, who happens to be his #1 fan. Since Annie is such a big fan of Paul's work, he agrees to let Annie read his unpublished Misery novel.
When Annie starts to read it, she starts to change by acting out and becoming more violent towards Paul. As time starts to pass, Paul notices that the worst is only yet to come.
Once again, we arrived at our one and only spoiler warning for the movie. It is up to you if you want to take it or leave it, but our personal recommendation is you watch the movie before viewing the rest of the video. That is why we will post the rules on screen now, just in case you want to watch the film before continuing. Now, let's move on to the rules.
So I guess just jumping right into it, our first rule, as always, is death, and that resulted in 4 sips.
I think there was some that were kind of speculative, like such as Misery, technically a novel character.
Yeah, some of the fictional characters they described as dying we counted.
Yeah. We added, I think it was Annie's husband.
Aside from that, there was really only the 2 deaths that we saw, which was Annie and the sheriff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we doubled it up just from picking other parts in the movies that wasn't really, like, you didn't visually see the death, but we counted it anyway.
Yeah, if you wanted to really also be picky, you could have excluded like the other 2 deaths, or if you wanted to have more drinks, you could also, I guess, add the deaths for like when Annie was killing children or whatever in the scrapbook.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But we don't know how many babies she
probably
killed.
over 5, so
true.
Yeah.
You can make that assumption if you want.
Yes. Let's move on to the second rule. As always, scream, cries, or yells. If you hear any of these, you take a sip.
Yeah, and it resulted in 13 sips, and it's worth noting that when you hear a scream, it generally affects you a lot. Like, it's impactful, because a lot of movies, there's casual conversations, and Annie seems really calm and, very nice, caring woman, honestly. And then all of a sudden she snaps and starts screaming. It's, like, very impactful.
I don't want her, bitch! I want her! And you murdered her!
And even in some of the scenes where Paul's in, like, he's screaming and Annie's just like super calm.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit of a 180.
It's unsettling too at times when it's stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on to rule number 3, it's the namesake for the movie. It's whenever misery is said. This was the most brutal rule by far in this drinking game. It gave us 32 drinks. So it's said quite a lot, and it's probably mercied in several cases.
Yeah. Generally, we don't like adding names too much, but this is a fictional character, so I feel like it's also like the novel's name, so it's a little bit more lenient. I was surprised that it was mentioned quite a bit, though.
Yeah.
The first printing for Misery's Child was the most ever. Over 1 million.
Marsha, please.
I wasn't too surprised, to be honest, just because the plot revolves around Misery in a sense, so she's the reason that Annie is obsessed with Paul, and she plays a big role, so I understood why.
Speaking of Paul, next rule gave us 6 sips, which is whenever you see Paul typing.
Yeah, it's not as much as we expected. You kind of just saw it in the first scene, and then in the end, in the middle, where Annie starts getting him to rewrite the novel to basically bring Misery back to life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just few and far between, to be honest. And another rule that's revolving around Paul, it's whenever Annie hurts Paul. We should mention that it's whenever she physically hurts him, not hurts his feelings, but this resulted in 5 sips.
Yeah, and I guess it's also noteworthy that Annie was a lot worse in the book. So I believe in the book she actually like ripped off his thumb or like sawed it off or something like that. Yeah. Which honestly it doesn't seem like a lot, but it makes a little bit of a difference when typing. Like especially like the space bar or like just even maintaining balance with your thumb. It's difficult to say the least.
We could imagine at least. Also in the book she actually cuts off his foot rather than hobbling him. So that you could argue is worse for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Because you can kind of heal from broken ankles or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I guess what all this leads to is kind of just Annie torturing Paul for the most part. Like, she's mutilating Paul.
Yeah,
rather.
exactly, yeah.
Rule number 6 is whenever Annie reads Paul's writing, which is 8 total sips.
Yeah, and there's not much to say about this. She reads quite a bit throughout the movie. It's a decent amount of drinks, I guess, and yeah, there's nothing else to add, so I'll just move on to rule number 7. It's whenever Annie negatively critiques Paul's work, and that only resulted in 4 sips.
Yeah, it happens definitely a lot more at the beginning, and the main reason is Paul starts to realize that if he doesn't do narrate the book in the way Annie wants, then she's either going to make him destroy it or honestly hurt him. So he's kind of afraid for his life, so he just kind of does whatever she wants.
Exactly.
Well, it's brilliantly written, but then everything you write is brilliant.
Pretty rough stuff.
The swearing, Paul. There, I said it.
Next, we have whenever number 1 fan is said, and that was said a total of 7 times.
Yeah, and this rule, it doesn't happen all that much. Decent amount, I guess. 7 is a pretty decent amount, but the reason we included it is because it basically opens with that being said, the movie. I think that might be the first thing said. I don't know for sure.
I'm your number 1 fan. There's nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'll take good care of you. I'm your number 1 fan.
But it's just such a prevalent statement, I guess, that happens throughout the movie.
It's pretty iconic in the movie itself.
Exactly. And it starts with that saying, and then it also ends with that phrase.
I just want to tell you I'm your number 1 fan.
That's very sweet of you.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's
basically the start and the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It basically just comes full circle. So we felt it was important to include it. Another rule that we felt was important to include was rule number 9, which is when Annie gives Paul medicine, and that gave us 9 sips.
Yeah. To clarify, what we did was a little bit different. We included whenever she gives him medicine, not him taking medicine. So, for example, him just taking the medicine and just hiding it, for instance, or even I guess when Annie drugs him with a needle. So it's really up to interpretation. Now, the last rule we have today is whenever you see a pig, you take a sip. This resulted in a total of 6 sips. So you can tell that Annie likes pigs in the movie just because they're littered throughout the house. She has a pet pig, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And as you can obviously tell, we're talking about the real pig, Misery, I think her name is.
Yeah.
And we're talking about pig ornaments that she has as decorations as well.
Yeah. And so now that we've gone through all the rules, we'll go into the totals, which the total number of drinks for this movie was 94 sips. And that's basically equivalent to drinking 3 cans based on our 30 sip per can scale. There are a couple rules that we debated on adding, just ultimately didn't end up making the cut. Some of those rules are when Paul fails to escape or, does something to help him escape. Another example is whenever Annie does something nice for Paul.
Yeah. And the reason we didn't really add these is just because I feel like they were too vague, or I guess we felt that they were too vague. So those ones are really up for interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to add those types of rules, I'd say.
Yeah, it's very subjective. So it's harder to count, and our count might not line up with yours or whatever,
Yeah.
So
that's for the most part going to happen just due to a lot of interpretation. But these ones, I feel like you could go one way or the other in a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess one other thing that could have been good was whenever Annie makes up a swear, such as dirty birdie or cock-a-doodie.
Yeah.
But you're not good. You're just another lying old dirty birdie.
That would have been another good one, but I guess we just didn't add it in soon enough. Or by the time we thought of it, we already had everything up and going, so...
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good rule to add, though.
Yeah.
But overall, for the drinking game, it was slow, which it would have been even slower if Misery was not a rule.
Yeah, that made up for a third of the total drinks, so
Yes.
it's a key one to include, I'd say.
Yeah.
So now I guess we'll get into the movie a bit, or just some talking points about it. I feel like it's important to note that Stephen King, when writing this book, was obviously writing about his own fears with obsessed fans of his, or potentially obsessed fans, I guess.
Yeah.
I love you, Paul. Your mind, your creativity. That's all I meant.
And he does a super good job at showing how, people can be mentally unhinged and kind of just snap on the dime like that.
Yeah.
And he also does a really good job at showing how traumatic experiences can kind of help, I guess, in a way, for some people. Even Paul Sheldon at the end of the movie says that his experience with Annie helped him in a weird way, which I get it to a degree, but like, obviously, just on surface level, you would think he's crazy for saying that. But deep down, there's like a way that it makes you a better person or something, you know?
So both Kathy Bates and James Caan were very good in their roles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Especially Kathy Bates. Like, Kathy Bates got an award for this.
She won an Oscar.
She won an Oscar for the picture, which is almost unheard of for horror movies. As we were talking about, like in Rosemary's Baby.
Exactly. And I feel like it's deserved for sure, because like she did such a good job of portraying this, you know, calm, sweet, innocent lady, and then all of a sudden just she gets triggered by certain things. Like, she's so attached to Misery, the character. When she finds out that she's gonna die in the book that Paul wrote, it hits a switch on her and she just goes crazy and snaps.
There! Look there! See what you made me do?
And like, Kathy Bates does such a good job at, you know, making us feel for her, as well as just being terrified of her. And it's just, I don't know, like I said, she deserved that award for sure.
Yeah. And like, in the beginning, you kind of think that she might have like anger issues or something like that, but then you get to the hobbling scene where she's just like playful and like very calmly talking throughout the entire time.
Yeah.
While she's just basically destroying Paul Sheldon's leg, in a very brutal way, might I add.
Oh yeah.
And she's just like super, super calm about it. So it's at that point you don't think it's anger issues, you just think she's like mentally insane.
Yeah. And yeah, some might think she's like a psychopath or something up until that point where it seems like she's just mentally deranged, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And just talking a bit about that hobbling scene, like, that's my favorite scene of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Probably
everybody's, yeah.
And just because of how like cringy it is in the best way, because like, just imagine your feet with that wood in between them and getting sledgehammered to them, breaking them in, like, it just makes me cringe.
Yeah.
And I think the film does a good job too, showing how like it's basically just Paul Sheldon trapped on a farmhouse, but like they do a good job of showing how traumatic it is and stuff. And it kind of feels like low budget, or like because it really just takes place in one house essentially.
Yeah, almost like one room.
One room, yeah, exactly. Like, they obviously leave the room a couple of times, but it's not all that often. And like, the movie kicks off so quick with the car crash being like 5 minutes in, and then from there just going to the house basically. So like, that being said, it feels low budget in that sense, but it's still done very well.
And I guess one of the other things I really liked about the movie is just the dynamic of the characters. Yeah. As you mentioned, it's basically just those two in a house the entire time. Just the love Annie has for Paul and the hate Paul has for Annie, but he can't show it.
Yeah, he has to try and pretend that he was like in love with her or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just kind of manipulates her for his own plans to try and escape, which he has troubles, obviously, throughout the whole movie. And it's also worth mentioning that Annie is one of Stephen King's favorite characters that he wrote. I thought that was kind of neat to learn as well.
I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodle car!"
So with all that out of the way, what was your overall thoughts on Misery?
Yeah, obviously very well received, especially from my end. The main thing that really made the movie for sure, though, was Kathy Bates.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not sure if the film would have been the same without her, especially like a performance like that is just mind-boggling in a horror movie. Super good.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, James Caan did a really good job in his role as well, but the standout performance is from Kathy Bates.
Oh, easily.
And she definitely made the movie what it is today, and like, it's such a classic for that reason alone, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
And just the hobbling scene also helps cement it, I'd say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. It's a good movie, and I'll go back and watch it in the future as well. It's definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it.
Well, now let's move on to the award ceremony, where we award one not so lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to a character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also be given to a character that is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Paul, for not trying to find a way to kill Annie to get a hold of the outside world sooner, and instead letting the situation escalate to where she breaks his legs even more. We should also bring up the knife that he steals from the kitchen just to make it super obvious that he has been there.
Next up is the Sheriff Buster for going into a known serial killer's house with no backup, nor telling anybody where he is going.
The final nominee today is Annie, for letting her guard down when she gives Paul the match, and letting it down even further when she watches the book go up in flames.
And the winner is Sheriff Buster for going into Annie's house without considering the possibility that she might be dangerous and want to kill him. He has lots of evidence that Paul Sheldon was forcibly taken out of his vehicle, so realistically, he is saved by somebody that has a motive and wants to hold the famous author hostage, such as Annie, a woman with a history of being unstable and a big Paul Sheldon fan. Also, Sheriff Buster probably had enough evidence to go in and get a warrant and search Annie's home.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Misery. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments what your favorite Stephen King movie adaptation is.
Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next week's episodes, where we are going to be making a drinking game marathon for all of the Scream movies. From Monday to Friday, we will have one new episode a day, starting on Scream 1 and ending on Scream 5. If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and horror movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying
Cheers to fears.